Hello everybody and welcome to this revision lesson which is going to help you to do some preparation in the long term ahead of your end of term exam, which will be taking place after half term. Your exam will focus on the content that is in your weekly revision booklets. So it will focus on First World War, it will focus on the Holocaust, which we've been doing most recently, and it will also focus on the rise of Hitler. The four key areas that you need to revise are the events of anti-Semitism, or the examples of anti-Semitism, from 1933 to 39. So you don't need to know past 1939. So most of you are actually pretty much there or very close to in your study already. You need to know about the conditions in the trenches in the First World War. You need to know about the causes of the First World War. And you also need to know about the reasons why the Nazis became more popular and won more votes between 1928 and 1932. So this lesson, this session, is going to focus on preparing you to be able to answer the longer questions that are on the exam, which are about causes of the First World War and reasons why the Nazis got more support between 1928 and 1932. The causes of the First World War question is for 12 marks. That's an explain why question. And there'll be more information during the course of this lesson on how to do that. And the 16-mark question, which is at the end of your exam, is about the reasons why the Nazis became more popular. And again, there will be a little thing to watch towards the end of this lesson about how to answer those types of questions. So, first thing you're going to do is some read, cover, some write, and some check. So one of the things that we need to do to be able to store information in our heads is we need to be able to test ourselves. Okay, if we just read over something and we don't test ourselves and then evaluate what we got right and what we got wrong and correct it, then we aren't making our brains as active as they need to be for the revision to actually the knowledge to actually stick in our minds. Okay, revision needs to be an active process, not a passive process. All right, so you are going to be given some information sheets that look quite a lot like this. And these information sheets that you've seen before, because they're in your revision booklet, are about the causes of the First World War. And the first thing that you are going to do is you are going to self-generate some revision materials. So you are going to have a look at the materials on the causes of the First World War, and you are going to create some flashcards for yourself. Okay, so you're going to create some flashcards for yourself about the causes of the First World War. And on these flashcards, you need to have the causes, you need to have some evidence that supports why this was a cause. You need to use the knowledge on the information that you've been given to generate your own flashcards. So the person who is currently with you is going to pause the video now, and it's going to give you some time to make those flashcards. Okay, welcome back from your flashcard creation. So now you should have generated some revision materials for yourself, but in doing that, you've actually been stimulating some brain activity that means that that information is starting to sink into your longer term memory. So what you're now going to do with your flashcards is you're going to think about, because the question that you're going to answer is a 12-mark question explaining why. So what we need to do when we're explaining why is we need to consider exactly what the most important reason might be, how the different reasons link together. There needs to be a line of argument that runs through your answer. So have a little look at this modeling video about how to answer 12-mark questions and consider how you could apply that, or certainly the principles of doing that, to the topic that you're currently studying, which is the cause of the First World War. Think about what line of argument or what reason runs through the different causes which would explain why the First World War broke out. Here's your modeling video coming now.
explain question. So what you're essentially being asked to do here is to explain why something happened, explain the impact of something, explain the consequences of something. So there is an element here in which your analysis comes from considering the relative importance of the reasons that explain what it is that you're being asked to explain. So in this case, why was Hitler able to create a dictatorship in the period February 1933 to August 1934? So you're looking for a number of different reasons why that was able to happen, and your analysis comes from considering what's the relative importance of these different reasons. So a good way to think about this is to think about what your line of argument is that runs through your entire answer. The Mark scheme clearly says that you need to have a clear line of reasoning or line of argument. So this isn't a magical mystery tour answer where you start off saying one thing and then by the end you say something else. It needs to be a tight, coherent piece of writing which clearly spells out what your argument is, and then throughout the answer you link back to that argument using evidence to support what you are saying. So for an example paragraph here might go something like, one way in which Hitler was able to establish a dictatorship was by exploiting the Reichstag fire to move against his political opponents. So there is a clear point that is focused on the question. The text in green there is the evidence that you're using, so you need some sort of knowledge to support the point that you're making. And then the important bit for showing that you have a consistent line of reasoning is that last sentence, which is in blue, which links back into your line of argument. So you're showing how, in this case, the Reichstag fire was an important element in Hitler's ability to establish a dictatorship, but it wasn't as important as the Enabling Act, which is what you have set out as the most important factor in your line of argument. So in that way, your paragraph links back into your line of argument. That helps the examiner to show that you are focused, and it also helps the examiner to see that you have a clear line of reasoning throughout your answer.
So what you're now going to do is think about those flashcards that you've made. So think about the information that you've got. You're going to be able to test yourself and get someone else to test yourself on those flashcards, test yourself on that information. You can use your revision booklets at home to do that, as well as the materials that you've got today. And also think about the argument that you have, the reason that you think was maybe the most important cause of the First World War, or the cause that links the others together. And one of the other ways that helps us to remember things is to speak about it, to rehearse our arguments by talking to other people. Okay, so what you're now going to do in a moment is the person that is with you is going to press pause on this video, and you are going to speak to the person next to you, near you, and you are going to talk about what you think was the main cause of the First World War and why, or which cause helps to link the other causes together. But think about some sort of thread that is running through your answer. Okay, if you imagine your line of argument is like a washing line. Okay, and you're going to pin a t-shirt to the washing line. You pin it with your line of argument. So this is what I think. So there are many causes of the First World War. In my opinion, the main cause of this was alliances in Europe. Okay? And what you then need to do at some other point, or at various points during your answer, is you need to go back to that line of arguments. In other words, you need to pin the other half of the t-shirt to the washing line. Otherwise, your knowledge is just flapping in the breeze there, and it's not connected to an actual argument. So think about what you think is the main cause. Think about how those different causes link together. The person that with you is going to pause the video now, have a 3 or 4 minute conversation with the people next to you and near you. What do you think is the main cause and why? Okay, so hopefully you've had some stimulating and interesting conversations, but more importantly, you have been articulating what you think, and that's the important thing. You can have a conversation with a dog, hello, Fido. In my opinion, the most important reason for the outbreak of the First World War was alliances, because this created a system in which there was tension between different groups of powers in Europe, and without these alliance systems, there would not have been an escalation from a small local war into a large-scale European war, because without these alliance systems, it would not have led to an escalation of the conflict in the Balkans after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Right? Fido doesn't know what the hell you're on about. Fido's a dog. He doesn't understand the cause of the First World War. But by by talking it through, by explaining it to anybody, by verbalizing what you think, you are making some what we call cortical connections in your mind, which means that it is more likely to stick in your consciousness, more likely to stick in your memory. So if you think about what we've done, you generated some revision materials for yourself by making some flashcards from the information that you'd been given. At some point, you need to, later, I need to test yourself to remember that to be sure that you can still remember them. You need to correct any mistakes, anything that you don't remember. And then what you need to do after that is you need to start to think about how you're going to apply that information to an actual question. In this case, we know the question is going to be about the cause of the First World War, so we can start to rehearse our arguments. Okay, so that's the end of part 1 of this revision, which is on the cause of the First World War. Let's move on now to part 2. Right, here we go. So, part 2, we're going to focus on the reasons why the Nazis got more support, more people voted for them between 1928 and 1932. Watch this clip first of all, and as you're watching this clip, jot down some of the reasons that are mentioned. There's 2 clips coming up. Some of the reasons that are mentioned about why the Nazis got more support between 1928 and 1932. Here we go.
Germany suffered. A sudden drop in world agricultural prices brought poverty to the countryside. And then the Wall Street crash heralded a world economic slump. The Americans called in their loans. German unemployment rose to 5.5 million in 1931.
Damals, unsere Erwerbslosen standen jeden Freitag in Riesenschlangen vor dem Arbeitsamt und bekamen am Schalter 5 Mark. Nicht, das ist eine völlig neue und andere Situation. Da waren viele bei, die hatten ganz einfach nicht die Mittel, um ihr Essen zu kaufen.
Aber sonst war das ein trostloses Geschehen mit den Menschen, die mit dem Löffel in der Tasche spazieren gegangen sind, weil sie zum Mittagessen, bekamen sie ein Essen mit einer Marke. Das war ja ungegenwärtig, unmöglich. Nicht?
Unemployed lived rough inside the cities, as Germany became economically the worst-hit nation in the world. And then, just when it seemed things couldn't get any worse, they did. The 5 major banks crashed in 1931. More than 20,000 German businesses folded. Now the middle class was suffering.
In the autumn of 1929, the American economy imploded as the Wall Street crash gripped financial markets. The ripples of this financial crisis were felt heavily in Germany as American investors called in their loans and German banks struggled to stay open. This was a massive economic problem for the Weimar Republic and led to a huge depression during which 6 million people were unemployed. If you were a student or young person between the age of 18 and 24, there was a 40% chance that there would be no job available for you in the German economy. Thousands upon thousands of Germans relied on welfare and some form of help from the government. However, fearful of another hyperinflation crisis, the likes of which the Weimar Republic had suffered in 1923, the government chose a laissez-faire approach to economic policy. The Chancellor, Heinrich Brüning, was nicknamed the Hunger Chancellor, as his policies were largely seen as responsible for exacerbating the problems of the economic depression. Furthermore, the political system began to creak under the pressure of this economic financial meltdown. The government struggled to pass legislation through the Reichstag and increasingly relied on Article 48 to force through measures to try and improve the economic situation. Numerous coalition governments were formed and then collapsed. During this period, the Nazi Party and the Communists, two parties committed to destroying democracy, saw their popular vote increase year on year. Something troubling was happening to the Weimar Republic. Democracy was beginning to come apart at the seams. And this financial crisis, this economic meltdown that made the credit crunch of 2008, for example, look like a mere financial blip in comparison, was beginning to pull Weimar democracy apart. And it was this that would eventually lead to the rise of the Nazi Party and the destruction of the Weimar Republic.
Okay, so now, hopefully, you've jotted down a few ideas. That's helped to jog your memory of work you did a few weeks ago about why the Nazis increasingly, we're talking about going up in electoral terms an astronomical amount from about 2.4% of the vote to over 30% of the vote. That's a huge political upswing. So you've got some ideas. You're now going to be given by the person that is with you this material. So again, you've got a reliable source of information here. You've got some knowledge on, or some detailed knowledge on why the Nazis increasingly got support between 1928 and 1932. And again, it's very similar to the knowledge that you've already got in your weekly booklets that you do for homework with your revision. So this is your reliable source of information. This is the correct information. What you're now going to do, again, it's important to self-generate. So we made some flashcards because the process of making the materials ourselves is really important for helping that memory to stick. So we're now going to generate some materials for ourselves. So you're going to read through that information and you are going to create your own concept map, spider diagram, your own notes in whatever format you want. You might link things together, however it fits nicely on a page or two for you to help you make connections between the different information. You might have some things that were to do with the Nazis themselves. You might have some things that were outside of the Nazis' control. You might have sort of the Wall Street crash in the middle and then the things springing out from that. It's entirely up to you how you do it. But the person that is with you now is going to give you about 10 to 15 minutes and you are going to make those revision notes for yourself. So you're going to take the information that you're being given and you're going to generate some revision notes in the form of a concept map or a knowledge organizer for yourself. Off you go. Okay, so you have got your revision notes in front of you. That self-generation of revision notes helped you to bring that stuff back to the front of your mind, and it means that later on you could use that to test yourself. You could cover over the notes, and then you could try and write them down from memory, and then you could check to see what you got right and what you didn't write, and didn't get right, and make a note of the things that you didn't get right, so that again. You're trying to create what we call multiple pathways to the knowledge. So the things that you remember then not remembering something, which in itself helps you not to remember it, not to forget it again, sorry, and to remember it in the future. Okay, you're trying to make multiple connections in your mind to the information, which means that when you have to go and find that information in your mind in the future, it's easier to find it. Okay, so what you're now going to watch is a little modeling video that explains to you how to write a 16-mark question. Now, this 16-mark question is on medicine through time, which is part of the GCSE course, which you haven't studied yet. So it doesn't really matter that you don't know about the knowledge. It's more thinking about the structure that is about to be explained to you. So in your 16-mark question, which will be on reasons why the Nazis got more support in Germany in the period 1928 to 32, it will say blah 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 was the most important reason. How far do you agree? Okay, just like this one has a statement and then how far do you agree? So what's got to run through your answer is an argument in relation to that statement, and most importantly at the end, a judgment which clearly focuses on that question and which clearly provides a conclusion which answers the question. The question says, how far do you agree? So it begs a response from you as to how far you agree and why you agree or disagree with that particular statement. So here we go. Watch this and think about the structure that is being explained to you. Okay, so here we have a 16-mark question from the Medicine Through Time, Paper 1, GCSE. It's phrased like this. Providing access to care and treatment has been the most important development in the role of government in medicine in the years 1800 to the present. How far do you agree? And you can see that we always have a little box of information with 2 bullet points to help us. And you can see the person who wrote this answer has added some bullet points of their own. And that's a really good technique for starting to think about planning out your answer. Let's think about how we decode this question and think about what it's asking us to do. All 16-mark questions, whether it be on the medicine paper or the Elizabeth paper, will have a quote, an assertion in inverted commas, and then they will have a how far do you agree, explain your answer, and they will have a little box to help you. But importantly, it says at the bottom of the box that you must also include information of your own. So it says providing access to care and treatment. Okay, that's the crucial thing. Providing access to care and treatment is the most important development. It's the most important thing that government did in medicine in the years 1800 to the present. All right, so we've got to think straight away, what is it asking us to do? It's asking us to assess the idea that providing access to care and treatment is the most important thing that the government did. So you can see in those little bullet points there, you've got the Public Health Act of 1875, which is not about providing access to care and treatment. It's about public health, and it's about cleaning up streets and ensuring that the public health is in a good condition. And we've got the NHS from 1948, which obviously is about providing care and treatment. And you can see the person who answered this question wrote Chadwick down, wrote vaccinations made compulsory, and the smoking ban. Some of that is about care and treatment, some of it is not. So that's the way to think about your answer. You are weighing up this idea that providing access to care and treatment was the most important thing versus other things that the government might have done. So have a look at the mark scheme. Here we go. We're mainly interested in level 3 and above, so that's 9 and above. The important thing is that some sort of overall judgment is required and it must be supported. It says that in the 9 to 12, and it talks about a justification of that judgment in level 4, 13 to 16. You really need that justification of judgment. You really need that explanation of your judgment if you're going to get up above 13. It talks about an explanation, it talks about analysis, it talks about accurate and relevant information. So we are looking for an argument which is supported, which is tied together with a line of argument, which has wide-ranging knowledge to support what's being said, and which reaches an overall judgment. Okay, and you'll notice in the bold, you cannot get past a certain level in the mark scheme, and no matter how good your answer is, unless you go beyond those bullet points that they gave you in the stimulus material underneath the question. let's have a look at this 16 out of 16 answer. You can see here in the top corner that this was marked as 16 out of 16, and it got 4 for spelling, punctuation, and grammar also. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at this answer, and we are going to try and pick out some of the good things about it. So I agree with the statement to a certain extent. So straight away here at the beginning, there is an agreement. There's the argument. Okay, I agree with the statement to a certain extent. Although providing access to care and treatment has been an important development in the role of the government in medicine in 1800 at the present, other factors such as compulsory vaccinations and public health acts are also equally important. Okay, that there is the argument. Okay, that yes, it's important, but there's other stuff that's also important. So you would expect in the rest of the answer to see that argument followed through. So first line of the next paragraph, when the NHS was created in 1948, the general public could now access free healthcare. Okay, I've done that in red, the same as the argument, because that is clearly linked to the question, to the argument that yes, better access to care and treatment is important. Okay, and then what comes next, which I'm going to put in blue, this bit here, is extremely important because now people who not have been able to afford treatment could also do so, boosting survival rates. However, due to large amounts of money the UK spent during World War II, that should say the NHS could not provide proper treatment and diagnosis options until the 1960s. So what we have here is knowledge that supports what is being said, supporting the argument, and so then it said, and this is where there's a little bit of sophistication in the argument comes. So because of this not happening until the 60s, perhaps it's not, it says it's perhaps not the most important development in the role of government in medicine 1800 to the present. So there's a bit of analysis, there's a bit of evaluation that links back. The red is focused and linking back to the argument. The blue is the knowledge. Okay. In contrast, so we know we're going to be talking about something else here, the many public health acts and other ways of preventing ill health that the government has created during this period have been equally, if not more important. Okay, there's the argument. Remember, we go back to the argument here that there's other things that the government did that were possibly more important. We then have the Public Health Act. So we've got the Public Health Act mentioned. We've then got a move away from laissez-faire attitudes. We've got some good knowledge here that supports what's being said. Now, so far, in the knowledge that we are using, so we've got, in this paragraph, we have NHS, and in this paragraph here, we have Public Health Act of 1875. These are the things that were mentioned in the stimulus material. So, to move beyond that stimulus material, we now have the smoking ban, and we have the campaign against HIV/AIDS in the public information campaign in the 1980s. And so therefore, this was really important. And here comes a little bit more sophisticated analysis. These are extremely important developments. So this is possibly more important than access to free care and treatment, because now disease could be prevented, which created less strain on the NHS, allowing better quality of care to take place for those who needed it. So what we're saying in this part of the argument is that actually the development of public health acts and some preventative measures and some information campaigns from the government in turn helped there to be better treatment, because it meant there was less strain on the NHS because less people were getting ill in the first place. We now move on to the next slide. Furthermore, events such as the smallpox vaccine in 1863 and the HPV, it should be 1854 actually, and the HPV vaccine in 2008 being made compulsory were perhaps most important because the government provided care and treatment, because by doing this directly, disease was eradicated. So what we have is, when we say furthermore, there's a development of the argument there, and then there's some really good knowledge that isn't mentioned in the bullet points at the start of the answer, which is about smallpox, it's about the HPV vaccine, and it's about the impact that that had, and how that, and this is what we come back to with the argument, how that meant that it placed less strain on the NHS, so there was more opportunity to provide quality care. All right? So far in this answer, and you can see by the red and the blue, we've got a nice argument that's been driven forward. We've got a clear response to the question. There's an agreement, partial agreement with the question. And in the blue, we've got plenty of knowledge that is being used to support what is being said. Now, if you remember, when we go back to the mark scheme, there was a big emphasis here and here on a judgment. Okay, the 16 mark questions are the only questions in the medicine paper and the only questions on the Elizabeth paper that require a judgment. 12 mark questions do not require a judgment, but 16 mark questions do require a judgment. So let's have a look at the judgment. In conclusion, I believe that although providing care, access to treatment and care was an important development in the role of the government in medicine, it is not the single most important factor. I think that overall the government stopping the continuation of its laissez-faire attitude and to focus on preventing disease and some health issues is equally, if not more important. Because that gives, so what is given can be of a higher quality and as a result of less economic strain on the government programs like the NHS. I believe that providing access to care and treatment and the use of other public health acts and laws are the most important developments. So what we see here is a really developed argument, a judgment that drives that argument forward, and the judgment is made. That judgment is supported by reasons and is justified. So again, if we go back to the mark scheme, it says criteria for the required judgment are justified and applied in the process of reaching an overall judgment. So the criteria, so this answer is considering what we think the role of the government is more important in some, is considering that the role of government is important in some areas rather than not, and the criteria being applied is the impact that that government is having on the care and treatment or on the prevention of illness and disease. So there you have a really good, if you look at it, it's not the longest, it's not the most complex answer, but if you look at the red for argument and judgment and analysis, and you can see there's little mini judgments throughout the answer that then build up to the overall judgment at the end, and we see the blue elements of knowledge that have been to support that. That's a really tight, well-focused, well-argued and detailed piece of work with a nice judgment which is justified at the end. So I guess now it's time for you to have a go at answering a question for yourself. Good luck, do your best. So your final task then is to think about what sort of argument would you have about the most important reason why the Nazis got more support between 1928 and 1932. Now, the answer is going to be drawn from a number of different reasons that you've already written down. So it could be because of the Wall Street crash. It could be because the Nazis were brilliant at propaganda. It could be because Hitler was a fantastic speaker. You need to think about what your argument is, because whoever asks the question, and in this case it's Miss Thika and I asking the question in your Year 9 exam, someone's going to pick one of those reasons and say, was this the most important reason why the Nazis got more support? And this was, how far do you agree? This one was, how far do you agree? If you're clear in your own mind before you get into the exam what you think the most important reason is for why the Nazis got more support, then you're already set up actually to respond to somebody's assertion that this is the most important. How far do you agree? So it's about again rehearsing that argument and thinking about what you agree. So what you think and what you would agree and disagree with. So the last little task for today is for you to think about the reasons that you've got for why the Nazis got more support and consider which one you think is the most important, or which reasons, plural, are the most important, and write an argument and a judgment which explains why you think that. Okay? Because again, having a strong point of view about something, having a strong argument is going to help to bring the information that you need to support that argument back into your mind. And it's going to make your answers to your questions at the end more clear, and it's going to make it easy easier for you to remember the information if the information is connected to a really strong line of argument or something that you've rehearsed. And again, you can tell the dog about why Hitler got more support, and it'll help it to stay in your mind. Okay, so well done if you've managed to get through all of this in one session. I strongly suspect that you probably haven't, but hopefully this will help you moving forward, and your actual time to need to use this for real in your Year 9 exam is in about 3 or 4 weeks' time. So this is some good revision ahead of that, and some good strategies that you can use to help revise in the future. Actually, think about what we've done. We've self-generated some information, so we've used our minds to take information from one place and put it in our own words. We will, in the future, try and remember that information. We'll try and check to see what we got right and what we got wrong, and in the process of testing, we will help ourselves to remember more. And then we've spoken about what we think, and we've rehearsed our ideas, and we've kind of spoken our ideas into memory to try and help us when we come to answer the specific types of questions that we might have to answer in the exam. So we're rehearsing and preparing our minds to do the same sort of thing whilst we're revising as we will have to do in the exam at the end, which is the whole point. Take care. See you soon. Bye bye.